So I've recently been going through the filmography of Daniel Day-Lewis, and now time has come for Nine, which is a real oddity compared to the rest of the bunch. Most of the other roles Day-Lewis takes are serious dramas, whereas this one is an exuberant, eccentric musical that skirts the line between drama and comedy. The film itself has a rather interesting story of conception, because its origins can be traced to Eight and a Half, a 1965 film by Federico Fellini. It was a partly autobiographical drama about a movie director who gets tired of the business but gets continuously roped back in by the producers and all the rest of the people. And in between all the show business craziness, he escapes into his dreams and imagination to reflect back on his life and the people in it. Fellini was then approached about remaking the film as a Broadway musical. He agreed to give rights to it on condition that neither his name nor the original title Eight and a Half appears anywhere related to the remake. So Broadway just renamed it to Nine and went about their day. The musical was apparently quite successful over the years, done hundreds of times with various performers, and eventually time came for a film adaptation of the Broadway adaptation of the original film. Thus, the movie Nine was born, and it is what it is. The stage musical moved to film form. And as interesting as it makes it, I personally found it lacking, especially compared to other Day-Lewis movies. I'll start with the things that work, because there are a few of them. The costumes and the Italian setting is absolutely fantastic. The film has a killer cast. Apart from Day-Lewis himself, there's Nicole Kidman, Marion Cotillard, Penelope Cruz, Judi Dench, Sophia Loren, Kate Hudson, and even Fergie. That's an impressive list of names, and I'm happy to say all of the ladies deliver performances on par with the one from Day-Lewis, who himself is expectedly terrific as the Italian director. As usual, he disappears into the role completely and becomes the character, becomes indistinguishable from it. It's also very clear that he's had a blast while shooting the movie, and he confirmed that he confirmed that he had fun, and he even confirmed that the only reason he took the role was because it promised to be such an unbelievable experience. And finally, the film does have a certain vaudeville energy to it. In this way, it reminded me a little bit of Chicago. Similar to that film, the musical numbers here are not entirely real, not entirely part of the story proper. They're more like interludes happening kind of on the side, concocted in the imagination of Guido. Problem is, the songs themselves are not that great. A day after seeing the film, I couldn't hum a single tune from it. I just can't remember any of them. Even whilst I was watching the movie, I thought that because of the aesthetic of burlesque so heavily used, many of those songs seem very similar to one another, and there wasn't much for me to distinguish them from each other. And that's just the first of several problems. I think not all of the actors involved in the production are particularly good singers or dancers. While people like Fergie or Marion Cotillard are flawless, others, especially Daniel Day-Lewis, look lackluster in comparison. Especially he himself. He's in his number. He looks weak. It's just very obvious that he's not an experienced singer or dancer. And while it can sometimes still work in a musical, I'm looking at La La Land here, I don't think it does here. And then there's perhaps the biggest problem of them all, which is the tonal inconsistency. The first half hour or so leans heavily towards comedy, and the absurd situations coupled with Day-Lewis's unexpectedly good comedic timing make for an entertaining watch. And I thought the story would continue this way, playing in all the showbiz insanity and Guido's neurotic tendencies. But then the further the story goes, the more introspective and serious it becomes, even at certain points reminding me of Synecdoche in New York. But it doesn't feel like a natural transition. It's actually kind of jarring when you're watching this comedy and then at one point realize it hasn't really even tried to be funny for the past 20 minutes or so, and is now something else entirely. And at that point, I also think the use of songs takes me away a little bit from following the drama around Guido. And I thought to myself, you know what, this would be a better film if it was not a musical. The songs are dragging it down. And then it ended, and I have to admit, I'm not too impressed with it when all's said and done. I think the film takes a fascinating premise in terms of the story and concept, but messes up the execution. It ended up being a rather average film, passable to be sure, perhaps even enjoyable for the fans of musicals, but the only thing it did for me is make me really interested in seeing Fellini's original 8.5.